So recently I had a good old play with the Realme 9 Pro Plus, a very impressive and ambitious £400 mid-range smartphone, but if your budget can't reach quite that high, well, why not check out the regular Realme 9? It'll cost you 249 quid here in the UK, but it packs some pretty smart specs, including a full HD AMOLED screen. You've got a suitably huge 5000 mAh battery, 108 megapixel camera slapped on that back end as well. It certainly seems like the Realme 9 will be a very close rival to Xiaomi's Redmi Note 11. So enough banging on, time is tight, let's whip the Realme 9 on out of its box, take you on a full-on tour of the hardware, the software, test out the gaming chops, the camera, all that good stuff. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So question one, as usual, what do you get in that lovely yellow box? Well, there is one rather stunning Realme 9 smartphone. You got yourself a 33 watts dart charge adapter, Type-C USB cable, oh yeah baby, that's the good stuff. And Realme has also chucked in a cotton bottom case as well, so you can slap that on your Realme 9 and keep it safe from harm. And that's everything you'll find in the box, no surprises or shocks to speak of. So now let's check out the design of that Realme 9, and I've got to say, I really like the look and feel of this phone. It's a 6.4 incher, so certainly nice and comfortable to clutch, feels quite compact, certainly compared with a lot of 6.7 inch whoppers that I've been fondling recently. And that's despite the fact that the bezel here beneath the screen ain't exactly super skinny. Not too hefty, either at 178 grams and just 8 millimeters thick. But of course, flip it over and that is where the real fun begins. You got a few different color options, including Meteor Black and Stargaze White, but it is all about this Sunburst Gold model. You got this holographic 3D ripple design, which is pretty bloody lovely. Apparently that texture is inspired by the light of the desert. And you know, credit where credit's due, that back end certainly does look like the glittering surface of a sand dune, especially if you squint a bit, and you've had a few. You might expect it to be textured, but the arse is completely smooth here on the Realme 9, and also that matte finish seems pretty good at hiding scuffs and greasy marks. So I've got to say, as far as the looks go, Realme has absolutely nailed it for the 9 series. Oh, and while it is just plastic around back and around the edging as well here on the Realme 9, the front end is at least protected by Gorilla Glass 6, and you do have a pre-installed screen protector on there too. And no water resistance here, but the phone can take a bit of a splashing, no problem, just in case you get a bit too excited by that thrilling design. Now, despite the fact that we are balls deep into 2022, a lot of budget smartphones that I end up unboxing and reviewing still come with that stale old Android 11, but thankfully the Realme 9 packs the latest Android 12 with Realme UI 3. Now, Realme UI, very similar to the ColorOS launcher, which you'll find on the likes of Oppo smartphones, on which it is based, so you'll find a lot of the same features packed in here. You've got floating windows if you want to multitask with a bit of that instead of split screen. You've got the smart sidebar and all that shenanigans. Lots of gesture support, etc. But it retains a reasonably stock Android vibe as well. So you've got your apps tray that you can play around with there. You've got the Google Discover feed still. And plenty of customization to be had as well. So you can change up the look of the icons and the general UI, changing up the colors and the fonts. You can even change up the fingerprint animation that plays when you use that in-display fingerprint sensor. And you can have the edges of the display flash whenever you receive a notification as well, which tends to work better when you've got a curved display, but whatever. And because this is an OLED screen, yes, you do have an always on display option as well. Gonna schedule that for the times when I'm most awake. And I see that the Real Meow cat mascot is now part of the always on display lineup too. Unfortunately, there are some little quirks, shall we say, with Realme UI, one of which is the fact that you do get a reasonable amount of crapware pre-installed on these things as well, the likes of TikTok, that can get right to some sort of crappy tile game. You got bucking.bloody.com on there. And also Realme only tends to offer a couple of years of security and OS updates maximum with its smartphones, so not as good as if you picked up a OnePlus or a Samsung blower, for instance. As for the security, well, it is an in-display optical fingerprint sensor just housed down here near the bottom of the screen. So far, seems perfectly respectable. I mean, in-display fingerprint sensors have come a long way in the past couple of years. Some of the early ones were a little bit atrocious, whereas now I don't tend to get too much jip from them. You've got Face Unlock on board as well. And as for storage, well, it's 128 gigs in the UK model. I believe a 256 gig model might also be available in select regions. As you can see, not too much of it used up to begin with though, and this is after I've downloaded a selection of apps. And the good news is you can also expand that storage quickly and cleanly using a microSD memory card. As you can see, it's got its own dedicated slot in there alongside 2 SIM slots. Now the Realme 9 sports a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED display, so it's definitely a bit of a blinder at this price point. Full HD plus resolution, 2400 by 1080, so the fact that it's only a 6.4-incher means lots of fine detail packed in there as well. Images are nice and crisp. By default, the screen colors are set to vivid, which suits me down to the ground. You can chuck it down to more natural colors if you want, but there's all kinds of different display options away in here. Another advantage of OLED screens is the nice wide viewing angles. No complaints on that front here, that's for sure. And I'll tell you what, when you bump up the brightness, absolutely no issues with seeing outside. Even I would imagine if it was a sunny day, though it hasn't really been very sunny here for about a week or so, so kind of hard to test that. And the selfie cam orifice isn't too massive. It is shunted away in a corner, so it doesn't intrude on that action when you go full screen. And back in those display settings, if you dive on into screen refresh rate as well, you can see it's set to auto by default. That will scale it from 60 to 90 Hz depending on what you're up to. Otherwise you can stick it on 90 Hz full time if you like. And while you can get stereo speaker setups on budget blows around this price point, the Realme 9 comes packing just a mono speaker output, unfortunately. Let's see if it's any good. Hello you aesthetically pleasing people, and welcome to another bewitching episode of TechSpert Weekly, the weekly tech news show equivalent of a startled ferret. That's absolutely fine if you just want to be kicking back with a bit of YouTube in a fairly noisy environment. Not exactly the best clarity in the world, but reasonably loud once you punch up that volume. But few, like most budget-friendly smartphones, you do have an actual headphone jack, so you can get plugged in if you want to enjoy some top quality audio. You've also got Bluetooth 5.1 streaming support. So the Realme 9 is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 680 chipset, a fairly basic chipset overall, but absolutely fine for your everyday shenanigans, a bit of video streaming, messaging, all that good stuff. You're generally not waiting too long for your apps to load up, just a little bit of patience here and there will do the job. You do have 8 gigs of RAM sat here in the Realme 9 as well to help things move along nicely. Pretty standard benchmarking scores for this chipset, similar to what I got from the Oppo A76 and the Redmi Note 11, maybe slightly smaller multi-core scores randomly. But you know what, screw benchmarking, I'm in the mood to get murdered by some annoying bloody school children. Now Call of Duty Mobile plays here on the Realme 9 with the sort of medium to high-ish detail, settings and frame rate, and it's not a bad experience at all, to be honest. Realme UI comes packing a dedicated gaming mode which allows you to screenshot the action, record the action. The priority mode is definitely a must to make sure the game gets all the resources it needs and prevents pesky notifications from distracting you. And after I bumped the settings as high as they would go, the game played really nicely. A couple of tiny little jitters in the frame rate that I noticed, which I'm going to blame a couple of my deaths on. But apart from that, nice sharp visuals, nice responsive controls as well. That touchscreen, you can actually change the sensitivity if you want to, but I found on the default settings it was absolutely perfect. Got a good view of the action and everything, and the Snapdragon 680 chipset did not heat up at all. The smartphone remained cool throughout a couple of really intense games, so great to see. Sadly, one of the limitations of that there Snapdragon 480 chipset is the lack of a 5G modem, so unfortunately it's LTE all the way basically, but the Wi-Fi support seems strong enough, you know, no complaints with the download speeds or anything on here. And the battery life seems solid enough as well. It's a 5000 mAh capacity cell chucked in there, so fairly standard for this sort of budget price point. And Realme UI and the Snapdragon 480 all seem reasonably energy efficient, so even when I was playing Call of Duty, that battery meter was barely ticking down at all. Should easily last you through a fairly intense day on a single charge, and when you do need to juice it back up again, well, the Realme 9 supports 33 watt wired charging, so not the nippiest around by any means, but perfectly fine. No wireless charging, of course, that really would be asking for the moon on a stick. And last up for this mesmerizing unboxing of the Realme 9 budget-friendly smartphone, let's have a squint at that there rear camera tech. And Realme has basically pulled Xiaomi's trick of slapping a 108 megapixel primary sensor on this thing. It doesn't capture 108 meg images by default though, it uses 9-in-1 pixel binning instead. So what you actually end up with is a 12 megapixel photo, just helps to improve that low light performance. And of course you've got all the usual HDR smarts, you've got the AI mode if you want to generally boost the colors and make things look a little bit less natural, but maybe a little bit more visually appealing. I prefer the more natural output. And in my first day with the Realme 9, I've run around the place and just snapped a bunch of test sample photos for your viewing pleasure right here. It's not bad low light performance at all compared with some rivals, although obviously when things do get proper ambient, shall we say, then things do start to get a bit grainy. You've also got a basic ultra wide angle shooter on board as well if you want a more pulled back viewpoint, get quite a dramatic angle, and you don't have a telephoto shoot or anything. This is just a digital zoom. The final lens slapped on the back of here is a basic macro effort. And of course, as usual with Realme, bugger tons of bonus modes as well. You got portrait mode smart if you want to capture a nice bit of bokeh style background action. You can actually customize the blur as well. In lieu of a telephoto zoom, you do have a 108 megapixel mode as well if you want to capture a really high resolution image and then crop in later. You have a dedicated night mode as well, and here's an example of it in action. As you can see, it can just help to brighten up a scene somewhat. And then even more bonus modes tucked away in the more section, including the obligatory pro mode. You can use this with the primary lens and you can change up the ISO levels, the white balance, all kinds of shenanigans, and you can even capture images in RAW format. If you like to shoot home movies on your smartphone, well, you can capture either 720p or 1080p HD footage. And again, here's just a couple of quick sample videos that I shot on the fly with the Realme 9, just to give you an idea. Fairly sort of basic visuals. The sound capture seems okay. Not particularly strong image stabilisation, of course. You don't want to jerk around too much while you're recording. And then last up, around the front of the Realme 9, you've got a 16 megapixel selfie shooter using Sony's IMX471 sensor, if anyone's particularly bothered. And again, seems pretty capable, even if you're shooting in stronger light, in slightly lower light, although don't go too nuts at night time. And shooting video with that 16 meg selfie camera also possible. Again, 720p or 1080p are your options. This is full HD footage, so the visuals are okay, you know, a little bit gritty. Once you move indoors, audio capture, again, seems perfectly fine. And there you have it. That in a nutshell is the fresh new, very shiny, very glimmery Realme 9. Do like that funky design. And there's plenty to really like here. You got some pretty slick performance for this sort of budget price point. Can do everything you want, even a bit of light gaming on the side. All day battery life, no worries. Gorgeous Super AMOLED display. The latest, freshest Android 12, thank God, although not really sure how many updates it's going to be receiving beyond Android 13. So overall, very nice indeed. Realme seems to be upping its game in 2022 and really taking it to the likes of Oppo and Xiaomi. So what do you reckon? Are you tempted by the Realme 9 regular edition? There is a Realme 9 5G version as well, also emerging, similar sort of time for a similar price point. So hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on that as well, do a bit of a side-by-side. Please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a bloody lovely rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.